He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Kurow, home to nearly 400 people, located in the Waitaki Valley, North Otago, South Island. Small town Aotearoa. And there's some great things about the place. Good fishing, good wine, popular cycle trails, and signature dishes.
We make the best scones you'll ever have.
Kate White's lived in Kurow for 30 years and runs the lodge and cafe Waitaki Braids, named after the local river. If nature is your thing, it would be worth the visit.
It's physically a beautiful part of the country. We have 7,000 holiday makers come in the summer and camp around the lake. I mean, we've got mountains. We've even got our own ski field, Awakino.
But it's also world famous for the childhood home of a former rugby All Black captain and 110 Test veteran. All of which makes Kurow sound like a pretty cool wee town. Except Kurow isn't really a place at all. At least it's not the original name for that place.
Te Kohurau is a really significant name and place for us in our whakapapa.
Yeah. The first name for this North Otago town was Te Kohurau. And if that sounds a lot like Kurow, well, that's because Kurow is the anglicised version. It's something that's happened all over the country. Hard to pronounce Māori names got rebuilt to fit European mouths. And mangled as they may be, many of those names have stuck because, well, names matter. They become part of us, as you can hear in this famous clip with a talkback caller to Marcus Lush on News Talk ZB in 2019. Mary was the caller's name.
Would you deliberately call a cheese camembert?
Hell no, I know better than that.
But you don't. But you'd mispronounce Opaho.
No, it's not mispronounced. That's my hometown, Marcus.
No, that is. But if I told you how it was pronounced, right?
Well, it's a bit late now, dear. I'm 83 soon.
But why is it too late now?
Good question. Even after 30 years, Kate White decided it wasn't too late to learn about her town's name.
The name is Te Kohurau, and because it said row on the end, R-A-U, what has happened is there's been a bastardisation of the name, and they've shortened it to Kurow. So you get the row your boat.
Called Justine Murray Aho, and that call-in we heard earlier from Mary really struck a nerve. I mean, how much that anglicised name mattered to her. But also, how many people just don't know the amazing stories behind the original names of so many places in Aotearoa, because place names are a snapshot of history of a place and of the people who've lived there. So in this series, we're going to dig out the stories behind those place names, starting with Kurow. This is Nau Mai Town, a podcast about Aotearoa place names. We've already met Kate, a local business owner and maker of great cheese scones. A Pākehā woman originally from Banks Peninsula, she spent most of her adult life living in the main cities before ending up in the country.
I've been here 30 years. I said I'd do 10. It's an interesting town because it sits on the edge of the river, and on one side of the river is South Canterbury. The Hakatarami is in South Canterbury, and Te Kohurau is in North Otago. So you've got Crusaders, Highlanders. What was traditionally blue voters and land, large run holders, and, you know, big wool prices in the days of big wool prices, big farms, big wool prices. And then on the Te Kohurau side, you had the dam workers on the Waitaki Dam. Te Kohurau is the home of Social Security. Arnold Nordmeyer asked the dam workers to put a penny a week in to support the injured workers that were there. So Arnold Nordmeyer, the minister and the doctor, got together and started Social Security in New Zealand. So this is the home of it. It's a tricky word to say, Te Kohurau.
And Te Kohurau literally means many mists. Kohu to mean mist. Adding rau makes it many or 100. So why isn't the name Te Kohurau widely known? I suppose it depends who you ask. I reached out to Justin Tipa. He's the Māori language teacher and Pou Arataki Māori, head of Māori culture with Fonterra.
The only time we ever referred to it as Te Kohurau was one of the local fish and chip shops was known as the Te Kohurau shop. But the locals would call it Te Kohurau. But, certainly with our family, we would call it Te Kohurau.
Te Kohurau also begins with a voyage across the Pacific Ocean.
So most of the place names around our district are associated with the Arai Te Uru Waka tradition.
With pūrākau, or Māori legends, landmarks are often connected to the history. On its way to the South Island, the waka, Arai Te Uru, ran into choppy seas. Calabashes and food baskets on board fell into the ocean. Now, these became the Moiraki boulders at Kuekohe Beach.
Te Kohurau was a tupuna on board the Arai Te Uru Waka that capsized down at Matakaia Shag Point, and several of the crew members never made it back aboard and subsequently became many of the geographical features of Te Waipounamu.
So his physical body transformed into a hill, known today as Kurow Hill.
So Te Kohurau was a kāinga for us. It was a kaika mahinga kai where we gathered tuna and weka. And it was a part of the main trail for us that went from the coast inland over into the Queenstown Lakes, Hawea, Wānaka region.
If we know Te Kohurau was an ancestor of the Waitaha people, where did Kurow come from? Wendy Shaw has worked with Land Information New Zealand, or LINZ, and the New Zealand Geographic Board Secretariat for 40 years.
The simplest way to think of this is that the transcription, or the way it was transcribed for the original Māori names, were usually done by a surveyor or a settler or a Crown official or perhaps a missionary, and sometimes they were not that well educated. And then the other way of looking at it was that they would write down what they heard according to their ear of origin. So, for example, Captain Cook's Northumbrian ear wrote for Te Waipounamu, Tovi Po Namu. T-O-V-Y.
Tovi.
P-O-E.
Po.
N-A-M-M-U.
Mamu.
Yeah, so that's what he heard. And so in his English, that's how he wrote Te Waipounamu. So this has actually happened throughout Aotearoa, New Zealand. And once the written standardised form of Te Reo Māori was established, the board itself has sought to uphold the spelling of such names correctly so that the meaning of the story associated with the name is beyond doubt.
But it's one thing to get the meaning and spelling right, quite another thing for people to use that name. For local Kate White, it was while she was working for Environment Canterbury that she decided she wanted to use original Māori names.
For me, it started with the word hacker. People kept saying, "Oh, I live up the hacker." And they were actually meaning the hakateramea. They don't do a haka before a rugby game. They do a haka before a rugby game. And hakateramea is such a beautiful word when you say it. Really beautiful word, dancing amongst the speargrass. So then I started saying hakateramea. Slowly, my staff learnt to say hakateramea.
That's her staff at her lodge and restaurant, Waitaki Braids, by the way. One day, Kate wrote the words haka on a blackboard and put it at the front door. Now, it was her way of getting the locals to have a go at saying the words correctly. But there was some resistance.
There is pushback on it. People don't like it. They react quite strongly to it initially. But times are changing and people want to be seen to be changing with the times. So they'll still come in and they'll say, oh, I live up the Haka. And then they'll look at me and go, Haka. And, but they're as the Runaka say, they're trying. And that's all you can ask, isn't it?
And Moiraki-based Te Reo Māori teacher Justin Tipa sees it the same way.
People are really ingrained and they still try and, well, this is the way it's always been. But I think when you have people like Guy Nespina or Marcus Lush, and you have non-Māori in the media that are willing to have some difficult conversations and really champion the language as well, I think that helps when non-Māori hear other non-Māori correcting them or saying names properly, and it forces people to have a conversation. That's where the magic happens. It's in taking people on a journey rather than trying to use a big stick and force everyone to say it properly. The names that we're talking about, they're part of our whakapapa. They're part of our pūrākau. They're part of the waiata that we teach our children. They're part of the stories that we speak about on the marae. And if people are genuine, just give it a go and don't be scared. I think if the intent's there, people will be very well receptive.
Te Kohurau, Kurow, population a smidge under 400, home of good wine, cycle trails, fishing, the Waitaki Hydro Dam, and hometown of rugby player Richie McCaw, named after a rangatira, a chief, who overlooks the city as a hill, Kurow Hill, or Te Kohurau Hill. Ko kai tahu ka ti māmoi te mana whenua, te runaka o Moiraki te papatipu runaka o kai tahu. Nei rā te mihi mai o hā kia koutou. Thanks for listening to Nau Mai Town, written and produced by me, Justine Murray. Executive producer Tim Watkin and Liz Garton. Engineers Phil Benge, William Saunders and Steve Burridge. Thanks to Kate White, Justin Tipa and Wendy Shaw. Follow Nau Mai Town, that's NAUMAI, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio or any good podcasting app.